PSAs have been used for decades in order to educate the public about certain dangers that they may face. Because of this, these announcements cover some really heavy topics that can commonly be considered dark. But there are some that take it even a step further despite the already dark subject material. Today, we'll be covering a few of those PSAs that truly stuck with many when they first saw them. Follow my social media link below, and I hope you enjoy this one. The first PSA we'll be covering is called Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Unlike all the other subjects I'll be talking about, this is a video made specifically for YouTube that basically serves the same purpose as a PSA, although it's not official. This video was released on May 26, 2023 by Yeon, or Yeon, I'm not sure. It begins with a wolf putting on a sheep mask before we see a title card. I wonder why this wolf would say its name was Maria. Who am I kidding? We all know exactly where this is going. As the conversation continues, the wolf asks Lena what she's doing and she replies that she's working on homework. The wolf then asks how old she is and she responds that she's 16. At first the wolf says they're 18 but changes it to 17, adding the detail that their birthday was yesterday. Obviously this was to allow Lena to let her guard down, as that birthday detail will cause her to assume they're close in age. The wolf then asks her what she does outside of homework, and she says that she plays video games, although she's not allowed to play often. The wolf responds that they also like video games, and this is what happens. The way the wolf says, "Come to my house," instead of saying, "Would you want to come to my house? We can play the game together," it's just extra creepy. Every message is a demand, very blunt and straight to the point. Lena asks the wolf if their parents would feel uncomfortable, and the wolf says it's fine because their parents are always busy with work anyway. The wolf then says that they already know Lena lives in Witterberg because of her profile. Someone young may not be able to pick up on how strange this is. Who knows what details the wolf even used from Lena's profile in order to figure that out. At first, Lena seems a bit apprehensive, but unfortunately, Lena plans to actually meet the wolf. After the conversation ends, the wolf slowly walks over to a row of sheep masks, putting the mask they just used back. We can assume that 4 masks equals, well, 4 victims. I love how the video expertly shows the viewer the dangers of being online as a young person while using the old "wolf in sheep's clothing" saying. I definitely recommend you check it out below. The next PSA is actually a set of 3 from a series called Lessons from My Neighborhood. This PSA series is from the Kansas City Youth Ambassadors. The first episode of Lessons from My Neighborhood is called Duck, Dodge, and Roll.
Lesson from my neighborhood. Shootouts can be very dangerous. So when you're walking down the street and find yourself in the middle of one, don't run. Instead, duck, dodge, and roll. If you hear gunshots and you don't want to die, gotta duck, dodge, and roll. Yeah. You'll have a better chance of staying alive if you duck, dodge, and roll. Okay. Don't be like Bobby, who lost his head. He ran around in circles and now he's dead. If you want to stay alive, do this instead. Duck, dodge, and roll.
The first thing you probably notice is how Sesame Street-esque this video is. Some of you are also probably pretty disturbed when thinking about the fact that some children face these types of things on a regular basis, having to avoid certain areas when walking to and from school, or not being able to play outside with their friends for fear of ending up another statistic. After seeing a firefight, they continue to tell the viewer to duck, dodge, and roll, and to make their movements erratic when they're running away. We then get this segment at the end. It's much harder when you realize a kid was the one who made the duck, dodge, and roll quote. But this is only the beginning. Let's get to the next one called Hunger.
Another lesson from my neighborhood.
Oh, hi there. If you're hungry like me, when there's no food in the house, 'cause your mom's 3 jobs don't pay enough. She spent all the grocery money on overdue rent.
3 weeks late?
Come on, don't be blue. Here's what you can do. First you grab a big glass of water, then you drink it really fast, and the hungry feelings will go away, and you'll feel better fast. Come on, it's delicious.
I'm sure this hits home for some of you. It hits home for me too, but for a slightly different reason. I didn't experience this firsthand since I was lucky enough that my family could get assistance, so I never went hungry, but I was teetering on the edge of this for the majority of my life. It's crazy to think about how this is a reality for so many children, even those in the quote-unquote first world.
You're feeling so weak, there's nothing to eat, and you wonder if you can make it. When your tummy growls, don't go on the prowl and steal a snack or treat, unless you want trouble with Officer Pete. But if you find that you're hungry, it's bound to happen, I bet. Try swallowing air like this, then go to sleep and try to forget.
Absolutely brutal. I don't even have much to say here. The video spoke for itself. The third video is called Overdose. Very obvious what's gonna happen here.
Another lesson from my neighborhood. Do you know how to tell if mom is overdosing on drugs? If your mom shoots dope every day like mine, you can only help her if you know the signs of an overdose.
An overdose?
Yes, an overdose. Don't call the ambulance if you're in doubt, unless she shakes uncontrollably or foams at the mouth. That's an overdose.
Okay, that's an overdose.
That's an overdose.
Again, it goes without saying, but it's always very unnerving to think about the children that have to live through this type of thing on a daily basis. Wondering if your parent or guardian is overdosing or just nodding off. Also, if you've been around people that use certain substances or have watched any documentaries on this topic, that sigh is very familiar.
Find her on the floor or find her in bed, and if you know what to do, she won't end up dead of an overdose.
Really?
Yes, an overdose.
I don't know.
The signs of danger are simple to see. If she's twitching and seizing and can barely breathe, that's an overdose.
Yeah.
That's an overdose. That's an overdose. Mom always knows best.
Mom always knows best. Such an unnerving line, because when you're young, regardless of how your parents act, you genuinely believe they know exactly what they're doing. But the older you get, the more you realize how few people really know how to navigate through this life. I can't imagine the stress of having to worry about calling an ambulance every day for your parent, much less having to deal with the piling medical debt if you're unfortunate enough in this scenario to live in the US or any other country that actually charges for ambulances. Age 6 is so crazy to hear. I can't imagine what goes through a parent's mind having to tell their kid this as well. Probably a lot of shame and guilt, I'd imagine. If you'd like, you can still donate to their cause at www.youthambassadorskc.org. If you can't find it, just look up Youth Ambassadors KC on any search engine you use, and the website should pop up. This next PSA is from New Zealand, and it's called No Brainer. It starts off with a guy in a club setting walking around among a giant packed crowd of people. He makes his way into the bathroom and then into a stall. After this, he takes out a credit card and a paper towel. And after that, he proceeds to remove brain matter out of his head and crush it up with the card before he snorts it up with a dollar bill and leaves the room. Not only is this imagery definitely going to be censored due to how crazy it is, it's also so shocking that I'm sure anyone who saw this as a kid actually never forgot this PSA. There's also this extremely disturbing high-pitched ringing that continues to play throughout this sequence. Afterward, we see him wipe his nose and see that his pupil is extremely dilated. It then ends off with the line, "Every day, more and more people are lining up to destroy themselves. Be careful out there." Fireworks are extremely dangerous. I mean, they literally explode, so you'd think that everyone would know to be cautious when handling them. Unfortunately though, every year, especially on the 4th of July and New Year's Eve, we're reminded that some people just should not have ever messed with fireworks. This leads to a compilation of late 80s to 90s PSAs from the Dutch advertising company Sire, commonly called Vuurwerk, or Firework in English. Shout out to Bryn F on YouTube for chronicling a bunch of these in a compilation, and to the Public Information Film Wiki for an extensive amount of translation so that I can explain all the text that appears on screen. The first PSA in the compilation, called Countdown, shows hands counting down. However, there's something interesting about the hands on screen.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
With each number counted down, the hands lose a finger. It ends with text that says, "You're an ass if you play with fireworks." As you can see, the imagery here is super raw. It leaves nothing to the imagination, and it would definitely stick with you, especially if you're young. The next one featured I couldn't find the name of, so I'll simply call it Basketball. It shows a group of boys playing basketball before... Much like in the last PSA, this guy doesn't have hands because he played with fireworks. The text at the end is the same as the previous. The next is another I couldn't find a title for, so we'll just call it Laughter. It begins with a guy screaming, pretending like he lost his hand before popping it out of his jacket sleeve and laughing. After this, a forlorn looking man walks by, and they greet him but notice that he's actually missing his hand for real, so they proceed to laugh at him. Afterwards, we see that same text as the previous two PSAs. This fourth PSA starts off with some girls talking in a club setting before sitting down to talk to some guys. One guy seems particularly nervous, and he really isn't getting any attention from the girls. As they continue talking, you can see the part of his face has some pretty serious burn scars. It ends with the same text as the previous three. The next one is called Boy in a Band. It begins with a boy band singing a song, and nothing seems out of the ordinary at first, but I'm sure you know how this goes already. We see some type of boss, likely a record producer, turn off a TV with their music video on it. He praises them and then hands them a piece of paper to sign. It's here that we finally see that every single member is missing one or more fingers due to playing with fireworks. Because of their lack of fingers, I guess they're unable to sign the paper, so it's taken away, and we get that same familiar text on screen. This one I'll title Video Game. It starts off with someone playing a video game. Shocker. I'm gonna be honest, I thought this game was Crazy Taxi at first for some reason, but it's definitely not. If you happen to know what this is, let us know below. It pans down to the person who's playing's hands on the keyboard, and of course, he's missing fingers. He throws the keyboard before we see that familiar text. We see someone watching a nature documentary that showcases several animals. The person watching wants to change the channel but doesn't have any fingers on the hand closest to the remote, causing it to fall onto the floor. I think pointing out how difficult these normal everyday actions that most of us take for granted can be if you make the wrong move with fireworks is even more impactful, because it's those smaller things that we may not even think about that'll add up to be the most irritating. In Chicken, my own title, we see this guy handing out flyers for a chicken place. However, people mess with him, making him drop the flyers. Eventually he gets frustrated and walks into an alley where he takes off his mascot helmet and sighs. We can see several burn scars on his face, of course caused by a mishap with fireworks. In Explosion, we see a close-up of a man's eye and then a shot of his hand reaching towards something. They continue to alternate between shots of his face and said hand as the man speaks in Dutch. And then, this happens.
Het is al die jaren goed gevonden.
While that scream sound effect is funny, I can imagine how disturbing seeing something like this would be, especially if you're young. Perspectives, my own title, shows the perspectives of several animals. After this, we see a perspective of an ass, which is pure black with a bunch of commotion being heard in the background. In this one that we'll call Model, we see a video of this fitness model guy, and it all seems normal until...
Yeah, come on.
I guess he was flexing so hard that his false eye popped out, which I'm assuming he got from playing with fireworks. This one that I'll call Model again is very similar, however at the end of this one the model follows the familiar pattern because they're missing a lot of fingers. Shadow Puppet starts off with someone doing some pretty normal shadow puppets. Then, of course, the next shadow puppet with a familiar name doesn't have any fingers. Next is sign language. Something about the missing letters at the bottom really creeps me out here. Something about losing control, losing the ability to even communicate. I assume nowadays though that there are forms of sign language that accommodate people who have missing fingers. This one that I'll call Picking features a guy sitting on the couch as the text on screen tells us he can do something that nobody else can. He can eat from his nose with his toe. It then shows him picking his nose with what appears to be his toe, but we can see that clearly one of his toes was transferred to his hand after an accident, presumably with fireworks. This next one is regarded by far the most unnerving of all of them. Even the YouTuber that uploaded the compilation tells the viewer to be prepared. Operating table starts off with a light being pointed at someone on an operating table. First we see someone being worked on with what looks to be burns, and then it cuts to a surgeon putting on some gloves before showing a man that looks distressed, and a scalpel. We then see someone with a heavily damaged hand that's missing fingers and looks burned. It shows surgical tools being put down before it shows a freshly heavily damaged hand being worked on as a man yells in agony. We then see this.
Oudejaarsavond. Wij zijn er klaar voor. Jij ook?
I'm sure you can see why that's considered the most disturbing one. This next one that I'll call Change starts off with guys playing with fireworks in an alley. The firework blows up on them, and then we see surgeons operating on someone before they show a pic of what he used to look like. They unwrap his face, first partially, and then show that they replace the bottom of his face with a butt. We then see this sequence. Pretty lighthearted way to end this all off, but yeah, be careful when you mess with fireworks. Fire spreads quickly. I think most of us know this pretty well with all of the wildfires that we've witnessed all over the world in the past few years alone. Around 21 years ago, the New Zealand Fire Service was on their own mission to show people just how quickly things can go badly, even with a simple spark. At first, we see normal commercials on the TV, one being for the news and another for a TV show called Location, Location, Location. And then...
In the next few minutes, you could make a cup of tea, go to the loo, or see to the kids. Keep watching.
Those few cigarette butts that have fallen on the chair will cause a big problem. As time passes, we see an advertisement for Pampers before we see this. Then an advertisement for Farmers, a store in New Zealand that has clothes, beauty products, furniture, electronics, etc. The chair is almost completely consumed in just over a minute. We then see an advertisement for MSN. Another ad for Women's Day. An ad for a lottery card.
What you've just witnessed took just under 3 minutes. Never ever underestimate the speed of fire. Get out, call the fire service, and for God's sake, stay out.
In less than 3 minutes, an entire house has been destroyed. Honestly, the commercials truly put in perspective how fast a fire spreads. Most of us have gone through commercial breaks without feeling like any time passed at all. I think we all need to be aware of how truly quickly things can go wrong. Apaches is a nearly 30-minute educational film for kids from 1977 that honestly could regard an entire video on its own. The short version of this, just in case I do decide to make a video on this film, is that this film revolves around a group of young kids that are outside pretending to be Apache warriors. The film showcases how quickly things can turn deadly for the children if they're too careless to notice certain dangers. Unfortunately, this means we have to witness several of the cast die, some in pretty horrific ways. Due to the fact that I don't want to spoil the entire film because, again, I'm pretty sure I'll make a video on it, I'll only cover one specific death. One of the boys, Tom, is participating in a game where they have to hide from Michael, I think, or it might be Robert. Either way, they're playing it on a farm, and there's this place on the farm where a tractor is pushing a bunch of waste, I guess? While trying to hide, Tom accidentally falls into the waste, and he immediately realizes that it's too deep to get out of. As he sinks and fights to stay above this thick mess, he calls out for help. However, none arrives. Before we know it, he sinks below, and then silence, as if nobody was ever there. That's just one of many, so you can imagine the type of stuff we're getting into. I'll save Apaches for its own video though. Biggie Bear is a series of early 2000s PSAs aired in South Africa that revolved around TV safety. I will be honest, although these could be considered disturbing by some, especially during that time, these PSAs remind me more of an Adult Swim skit than anything. I'll be skipping Biggie Bear Meets a Friend, but just know it's about Biggie Bear having a beautiful time with his great friend, and that's all there is. Nothing intimate going on or anything like that, definitely not. Next we got Biggie Bear's surprise. It starts off with Biggie Bear talking to Mr. Spotty, who says he's sad. Then,
well, I've got just the thing to cheer you up.
What is it?
It's something that'll make you happy again. Look at the bubbles.
Are you sure this is okay?
It's fine. Everybody does it. See, kids, it's easy to be happy again. Bye!
you get what I mean by Adult Swim skit now? I mean, it's kind of funny, honestly, but obviously these PSAs are meant for parents who wouldn't want their kids seeing that type of material. In Biggie Bear Says Hello, Biggie Bear is in the middle of talking when he gets cut off by Mr. Rabbit, and then this happens.
I told you not to come here anymore! This is my show!
Hello, kids. How are you all doing?
Shut up!
What's the matter, Vicky?
Shut up! Huh? You like that?
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Well, that's not good enough. Do you see what happens when you come to my garden, Bunny? Huh? Do you see what happens?
Honestly though, if you were a kid and you saw this PSA, you'd probably be extremely confused. After growing up, I wouldn't be surprised if you thought you saw some disturbing public access kids show or something like in 1999. That's really it with these, but I just had to include them because I feel like some may think these are disturbing. These last two are going to be pretty heavily censored if they're able to be included at all. First, we have a PSA called Action Man, Battlefield Casualties. I think some of you may know exactly what this is covering even if you've never seen it before. It advertises a figure who's going through PTSD on his own with no support system. It shows him being paranoid and falling into multiple kinds of addiction to block out his memories. We see him sitting there, unable to escape the ghostly voices of his past as he dons the famously coined 1,000-yard stare. I can't show a portion of this, but let's just say Action Man finally erases his memories of the past. Finally, we have an anti-video game PSA from 2000 called Amok. This is probably the most insensitive PSA that I have ever seen, but I suppose that's also what makes it unnerving. They begin with a game called Amok 2, and as you can see by the player selection, you already know where this is going. These people had the audacity to show actual footage from these tragedies with video game death sound effects constantly playing throughout, and ended it by telling the viewer not to underestimate the power of video games. I think in response I'll just say, correlation doesn't always mean causation.